Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun. Tonight, we'll be looking at the topic training needs analysis, design delivery, and evaluation, leveraging on the Kirkpatrick model. And I'm excited, elated, delighted, very happy to have with us for the second time in quick succession, Omogbolade Adigun, a professional colleague, a brother, and also a friend. Notwithstanding, I would like to read very briefly an excerpt of his profile. Ladies and gentlemen, Omogbolade is an accomplished HR professional with over a decade of experience across high-profile experience in fintech, fast-moving consumer goods, e-commerce. It brings a unique blend of expertise in learning and development, performance management, talent management, succession planning, and recruitment to the table. Through his career journey, he has demonstrated a very strong commitment to driving organizational excellence and fostering a culture of continuous change. Previously, he used to be the learning and talent manager at PZ Cussons, Nigeria, where he was responsible for learning and implementing innovative learning programs and design for the organization, as well as optimizing performance evaluation process to maximize employee potential and, of course, organizational profitability. Currently, he leads the learning and development team at Zone Payment Network Limited. Omogbolade holds a master's degree in international human resource management from Rome Business School. He also has a bachelor's degree in pure and applied chemistry from Ladoke Aketola University, Ogbomosho. He's a proud member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, Nigerian Institute of Training and Development, and the Learning Development Network International. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, please let's pay attention. Let's milk from the experience, knowledge, and insights as Omogbolade Adigun will take us on the topic training needs analysis, design, delivery, and evaluation. Take it away, my brother.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Oluyemi Adeosun. My Egbon, as I used to call you, you are an Egbon to us in the field of HR, especially in Nigeria. And it's a pleasure for me to be here again. I know this is the second time in quick succession that I'm here facilitating a webinar for the HR mentorship group. And I'm always glad that I'm able to pour out the little that I know about these things, especially as it relates to the entire gamut of HR functions in the HR management space. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I hope we can all hear me clearly and loud and audible. If you can hear me, just please show some hands, can do a thumbs up for me so that I can know that my voice is clear enough. Okay, I think somebody said, okay. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Onilola, for confirming. Okay, great. So today we're going to be looking at a very germane topic. It's something that almost everybody within the corporate world has heard about, and I think there's no way you can be an HR professional and you say that you have not had a touch with this topic before, or you have not probably done anything related to this before. So the topic for today is training needs analysis, design, delivery, and evaluation according to the Kirkpatrick's model. So without wasting much of our time, because we actually have a lot, it's always a deep dive when it comes to these things. So let us go straight into it. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is we want to quickly talk about the agenda for the day, for the evening. And Mr. Oluyemi has done a good job by opening the session. And we're also going to be looking at objectives. We're going to be looking at identifying learning gaps, structuring effective learning, choosing the right approach, which basically means choosing the right delivery method for a training, measuring learning effectiveness or effectiveness of a training, and last but not the least, wrap up and also key takeaways. So moving on from there, let's quickly take a look at the objectives. So what are the objectives for this session this evening? By the end of the session, participants will be able to, number one, identify workplace performance gaps through effective training needs analysis. Number two is they will be able to develop measurable learning objectives aligned with organizational goals. Number three, they will also be able to apply ADDIE model to design relevant and impactful training programs. Number four, they will be able to choose suitable delivery methods based on audience and content needs. And then five, they'll be able to evaluate training effectiveness using the Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. So let's go straight into it. So what is training needs analysis, TNE? From my experience, I think I was already like almost a year or even 2 years into training and development before I even could say, okay, this is what training needs analysis is, because there was a lot of misconception about what training needs analysis is and what exactly it implies and what it entails, especially within the learning and development space and more broadly the HR space. But before I answer that question, the first thing I would like us to look at is, why do you even want to conduct a TNE? But from my own experience, the training needs analysis basically is a process of identifying areas that requires training within an employee's performance, an organization performance, or even a team's performance. That's basically what the training needs analysis is all about. But then again, we're also going to look at, why do we even need to conduct a TNE? And the first reason, or the first answer to that question, is that a TNE identifies the gap between required performance and current skills or knowledge. So basically, in the workplace, employees are working and doing their day-to-day activities, and also teams are also going about their different activities. So what a TNA aims to achieve is to identify where there are gaps in the performance of the team and also in the performance of the employee, and even broadly, the performance of the organization. That is primarily the function of a TNA. Also, it ensures that training aligns with strategic goals and directs resources where demand is greatest. So you don't just want to conduct training haphazardly. Just feel like, oh, okay, I think in organization, hey, they are recently doing data analytics. We can also do data analytics here. They are also increasing their training and development endeavors in terms of leadership, development. Let us start developing our own leaders here. Whilst these things are good, they may not necessarily be something that is required, especially for the context of your organization. So one beautiful thing that training needs analysis does is that it ensures training aligns with the strategic goals of the organization and directs resources where it is greatly needed or where the demand is most high for it. And number three, effective TNA helps to improve the productivity and the service of an organization by addressing the learning needs. Because the hallmark of a great company or a great organization is dependent on how fast they can close their learning gaps and address their learning needs. Because if you cannot close your gaps or manage your learning needs, you'll not be able to be competitive and productivity will be stifled within the organization. So these are the first three major reasons why you need, or why organizations or departments are required to conduct a training needs analysis. And that is why the learning and development team, or the training and development team of every organization, is tasked with this fundamental mandate of looking at the organization, looking at teams, and looking at people to identify where there are gaps or where gaps exist, and design appropriate intervention to close those gaps so that the productivity of an organization can be improved and the service quality that they are rendering to their customers can also be improved as well. So with that in mind, let us now go to something else, which is basically the levels of training needs analysis. So we've said that training needs analysis is the process of identifying gaps in employee performance or workplace performance or team performance. Good. In that definition alone, we've also touched on the levels of training needs, right? So training needs can be identified in three major levels, basically. The first level is at the organizational level. And at this level, you are examining the overall performance needs of the organization vis-a-vis culture, strategy, goals, and technology. So for an organization, you can decide to do a culture audit and say, okay, where do we need to improve in our culture? There seems to be something wrong. For you to even know that there's something wrong, it means an analysis has started that, okay, what is not going on well with the culture of the organization. And when you have analyzed the culture and you've seen areas where there are gaps, then you can now pinpoint these areas to now look at how best do you now want to address these areas. So you've actually done training needs analysis by the route of culture. You can also do it by the route of strategy. And this is very common these days because at the beginning of every year, most organizations, top leadership come together and say, okay, for us to be competitive this year, what strategy do we need to implement? And after they've discovered or they've deliberated on a particular strategy to work on for that particular year, the next question they're asking themselves is that, do our people, basically their workforce, do our workforce currently possess the competency? Now, competency is a group of knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do they have the required skills, knowledge, and abilities to be able to drive that strategy? Now, at that level too, what you are doing there is basically a training needs analysis, because at that stage, if you now decide that, oh, okay, we actually, for us to drive this strategy and in turn make the organization competitive this year, we need to have business analytics skills in our middle management cadre. We need to have developing executive presence in our C-suite work cadre. Already, training needs have been identified by just doing strategy. Then also in terms of goals, when goals and KPIs are being set at the beginning of the year by line managers and team members, organizations and through their line managers start looking at, oh, for employee A to be able to meet these goals, they need to they need to close this gap, or they need to acquire this knowledge, or they need to acquire a particular skill. When you're doing that, training needs is also being done. Training needs analysis is also being done. Then in terms of technology, let's say right now the organization is looking to massively take up AI adoption. Like, okay, we want to start leveraging on AI, and as a result, we want our workforce to be tech savvy enough to be able to work effectively and efficiently with AI. And a need has already been discovered there, because for an organization to increase its AI adoption, there are some basic and fundamental things that need to be put in place. For example, the tech savviness to be able to even prompt. Maybe you want to even send them on courses on prompt engineering. Do you understand? So that is how training needs is identified at organizational level. The second level is occupational, also what I call functional. And this basically assesses the skills and knowledge required for specific jobs or teams. Say, for example, now, we want to look at the finance team of an organization. In the finance team, there's also what we call the tax management team. And in light of the new tax laws that was released, which is going to be implemented in January, it is imperative that the tax management team within the finance department need to be kept abreast of the new laws and how it can impact on the business that they are currently in. Now, the head of the team, maybe the director of finance, can walk up to HR or call up the HR manager and say, okay, in light of the new tax laws that was released, we would require a deep dive training or workshop or seminar to equip our employees within the tax management team on the fundamentals and the peculiarities of the new tax regime that has just been released. that is also a training need, because by virtue of a new development in the market, it has led to a need within the finance team, which can only be closed as a result of a training. So level 2, which is occupational, or what I call functional, is the second level of training needs analysis. The third level, which is the most fundamental level that we are all aware about, is individual level. And at individual level, you are analyzing training needs by looking at each employee's current performance and identify who needs training and in what areas. And oftentimes, this is usually done at the end of an appraisal period. An appraisal, a performance period has ended, employees have been appraised, and say an employee's current performance is probably 3 out of 5. I'm using ratings here. And the expected rating is that, okay, it's supposed to be like at a 4/5 or a 5 out of 5. So there's a gap of 1 or 2, right? So the questions now arise. What does the employee now need to be able to close the gap that exists between the actual performance and the desired performance? The actual performance is 3/5. The desired performance is 4/5 or 5/5. That gap that exists there is the gap that has been identified as a result of a training need analysis. Right? So the need has been identified by comparing the actual performance and the desired performance. Another beautiful way of identifying training needs at the individual level is looking at the competency framework. In competency framework, there are elements such as the competency, the definition, the levels of proficiency, and the behavioral indicators. For each employee, they have a set of competencies that have been mapped to their roles. And when a skill audit is done, or a skill audit assessment is carried out, and the employee is rated against the competencies, the employee may have certain gaps in certain areas in terms of those competencies. So let's say, for example, in the finance team, they're supposed to have an advanced knowledge of IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. And let's say for the role of a director of HR, a director of finance, rather, pardon me, the person is supposed to have an expert proficiency of IFRS. But when the person has gone through a skill audit, it is realized that the person is probably at a working level or a practitioner level. That means there exists a gap of 1 or 2. So it's not only performance appraisals that training needs can be identified. Training needs can also be identified by auditing the skills, by doing a skill audit of an employee in a particular job role. And those are the major areas for identifying training needs at individual level, right? So moving on from there, we're now quickly going to take a look at understanding what the TNA process entails. And like I said earlier, training needs is basically the systematic process of identifying gaps between current employee performance and the desired performance to achieve business goals. That is just the definition of training needs analysis. And it helps ensure that training is not conducted for just training's sake. It ensures that training is targeted, it is relevant, it is aligned to both the individual needs and the organizational needs. And a well-executed TNA goes beyond just identifying training needs alone. It also uncovers the root causes of poor performance. And as we're going to be looking at in the next slide, we're going to be looking at what the training needs process even entails. Then also, training needs, gaps in performance is not only as a result of the employee not having a particular knowledge or a particular skill. They can even be as basic as not having even the basic tools for them to operate effectively, can even be as basic again as poor processes or motivation issues with respect to the employee. So the aim of training is also to identify the cause of a gap, because identifying the gap alone is not enough. Training needs also goes further to identify the cause of that gap. Because if you don't understand the cause of the gap, you'll not be able to apply the right intervention to close those gaps, right? So moving on from there, we're going to now be taking a deep dive into what the TNA process entails. Now, I have adopted a five-stage approach in the TNA process, right? And the TNA process starts with data gathering. And when we say data gathering is basically looking at areas where you can collect information about performance of employees within the organization. So you are looking at appraisal reports, you're looking at surveys, you're looking at competency frameworks, you're looking at interviews. And these are the areas where you can get data when it comes to finding out where gaps exist within the organization. So I can also go a step further to now say, okay, so using performance appraisal reports, how do you get? So for most organizations' performance framework, at the end of an appraisal period, line managers are supposed to come up with at least 2 training needs for employees within their teams, right? So sometimes managers are tasked with that responsibility of identifying areas where they feel their team members need to be trained on in order to improve their performance on the job, right? So by the time you are conducting an appraisal, the line manager is already taking now that, okay, I think the person needs to go for a training on effective communication. Maybe because during the course of the appraisal period, it was discovered that the employee's performance suffered because of poor communication skills, and the employee might be sent for a communication training, right? It can also be said that, okay, this person needs training on emotional intelligence because the person works in a position where they need to collaborate a lot with people, right? And because of the fact that they have poor emotional intelligence skills, it is affecting how they collaborate with other members of the team. So you are looking at appraisal reports. You're also looking at interviews. You could actually interview role holders, incumbents, and say, okay, run me through what you do here at the office. How do you do it? Tell me what exactly you do for the business, especially for people that are working in factory-related areas who may not necessarily have maybe standardized appraisal reports. You might want to do interviews. I also want to do interviews for line managers, especially for large teams whereby you have probably people, teams that have people like up to 10, 11 people. You don't want to waste your time interviewing everybody, but you can interview one person that has interacted frequently with all the 10 of them or 11 of them, which is usually the line manager, right? Another way of getting data is through surveys. You can deploy a 360-degree feedback, which most organizations even do as part of the appraisal process. A 360-degree feedback is deployed to the employees' uplines, peers, and even downline. So the upline is basically the line manager. The peers are people on the same grade within the same team or in other teams. And downlines are people that report to the person. And a key question that is usually asked is, what are the key strengths of this employee over the course of 1 year? What are this person's weaknesses that you have encountered while collaborating or interacting with them? So when you deploy this 360-degree feedback service, it is an avenue of gathering data about an employee's performance and to find out where gaps could possibly lie, right? So you can also look at competency framework. Like I said earlier, you can look at the competency framework from the viewpoint of conducting skill audits. So when you conduct a skill audit, you are basically assessing incumbent employees with respect to their current proficiency levels against the standardized proficiency levels that have been set out in the competency framework. So the gaps that exist between their current level of proficiency and the targeted level of proficiency is the gap that you need to close. Let's say, for example, if an HR director, okay, don't let me use this term. If a procurement director needs to have persuasion and negotiation skills, the persuasion and negotiation skills for a procurement director should be at an expert level, right? But when the person is audited, it is found out that this procurement director is only operating at the level of practitioner, which means the person has a gap of 1 because practitioner is next to expert. So that is a need on its own That's a gap rather on its own for that procurement director. And that gap needs to be closed for that person to be operating at an optimal level in terms of their performance as it relates to persuasion and negotiation skills as a procurement director. So I think I've flogged data gathering well enough. The next step is basically gap identification. So I think I've used one stone to kill two birds by talking about data gathering and gap identification. When you've identified your data sources, then next thing to do is to identify gaps, right? So we've said it, gaps in performance, gaps in terms of what people have observed in the employee, and also gaps in terms of skill audits in the competency framework. Now, the third stage is cost analysis. So like I said earlier, it is just not enough to identify a gap. The next step is to perform what we call a root cause analysis. What is the cause of this gap that has been identified? Remember the example I gave of somebody that has a low emotional intelligence and is required to collaborate with stakeholders in different functions. That gap that exists there can actually be a result of a knowledge gap. The person just doesn't know how to relate with people. Maybe they have very poor interpersonal skills, right? And when that exists or when that happens, you need to be able to know, is it because they don't even know that you need to even relate well with people? And that's why I tell people that it is not just about people having a problem. Do they even know that they have a problem? Or are they even aware of what to do? So basically, for you to understand it better, ask yourself this question when you spot this type of gaps. Does the person know what to do? If the person knows what to do, if the employee knows what to do, ask yourself another question. Do they know how to do it? Then if you now have answered the next question, that okay, they know how to do it. The third level is, are they willing to do it? Because it's not just enough to know what to do. You need to also know how to do it, and you also need to have the will to do it. So knowledge is basically knowing what to do. Skill is knowing how to do it. Ability or attitude is having the willingness required to do it. And that is why in your cost analysis, you need to be able to determine whether that gap is a skill gap, is a knowledge gap, or an attitude gap. Because if you don't do that, you will not be able to deploy the right intervention. And also, I need to sound a note of warning here, which is the fact that training does not solve all performance problems. Training does not solve all performance problems. In fact, training is only ideal where the gap is either a skill gap or a knowledge gap. The moment the gap is no longer any one of these two, training does not solve that problem, because the person knows what to do, the employees knows how to do it, but they are just refusing to do it. And that is basically attitude. But then again, there are other interventions the learning and development team or the HR manager can deploy to close gaps that are non-training related. You may want to employ interventions such as coaching, mentoring. Coaching basically means pairing them with a senior employee in an organization that is good with respect to that particular area, and you tell them to coach them on how to imbibe that particular ability. You can also mentor them. You can also do what we call job shadowing or even job rotation so that they can imbibe that particular ability, right? So an effective root cause analysis is going to help you to determine the right intervention to close the gap that you have identified in stage 2. So stage 1 is basically about gathering data. Stage 3 is about finding out where the gaps lie in the data you've collected. Stage 3 is cost analysis, where you are actually determining the cause of the gaps. Then the next stage is prioritization. So you have now come up with a list of training needs. So prioritization basically talks about you prioritizing the training needs that you have identified in terms of their importance to the business goals or to the strategic goals of the organization. Because trust me, not all training needs are the same. Some have higher ranking, some have a lower ranking, higher ranking and a lower ranking. So basically, in prioritization stage, you are only just ranking the training needs in terms of their level of importance to strategic goals and organizational goals. If, for example, an organization has said, okay, this year we want to ensure that our workforce is more data-driven, and somebody already has issues with Excel or probably Power BI within their team, any Excel training need that during the TNA process for the organization is going to be ranked amongst the highest training needs, because it directly keys into the strategic direction of the organization. So that is how you rank training needs. Another way you can rank them is also by population. If after the end of your TNA process, you are seeing that, okay, data analysis or Power BI skills or copywriting skills is one of the highest number of needs that cuts across, let's say, 30-40% of the workforce, it is already indicative that that particular need is very important and you need to prioritize it. Then the last stage in the TNA process is basically interventions. And during the intervention stage, you are only selecting the right approach or the right delivery method to deliver those trainings that you have prioritized. Are we going to be sending people to training consulting firms for them to have the training? Are we going to be doing virtual training? Are we going to be doing e-learning? Are we going to be doing instructor-led trainings within the organization? So at that point, at the intervention point, you are only recommending the proposed intervention to actually deliver the training needs that you have identified, right? So let's move on from there. And the next thing we're going to be looking at is, we're going to be, we're going to be looking at the output of an effective TNA. Like I said earlier, there are 5 stages in the TNA process: data gathering, gap identification, cause analysis, prioritization, and interventions, right? So the output of an effective TNA is also in 5. There are also basically 5. The first one is list of identified training needs. So at the end of a training needs analysis project, you need to have a list of training needs that you have identified, right? Then the second thing you're supposed to have again is the learning objectives for each of those trainings. And let me quickly talk about learning objectives here. Learning objectives basically talks about what the training that you have identified, what does it need to achieve? What are the expectations? And the expectations will be coming from 2 people, both the employee and the line manager, because you also want to involve the employee, because if you don't involve the employee, you might inadvertently create a problem that will serve as a learning barrier. It will be a barrier for the employee to even learn. So you want to involve employees when you are setting objectives for the trainings that you have identified. So it is a very good output of an effective TNA is for you to define the learning objectives of the training. So for each training that you have identified, it has to have at least 5 objectives documented. Then the third output is the target audience profiles. Remember in my previously when I was talking about levels of training needs analysis, I made reference to the fact that, okay, an organization can determine that they want their middle management cadre of staff to have high business analytics skills, right? So that alone has already told you the audience profile that they are looking at. Basically, employees probably from supervisor role up to the managerial roles, right? So you need to also have the audience profile. So let's just say a 5-column spreadsheet where you have list of identified training needs, the learning objective for each training that has been identified, the audience profile. Are they supervisors? Are they managers? Are they junior employees? Are they C-suite level or board level employees? So this information would enable you target your training intervention. It will allow you streamline it, because if effective communication occurs as a training need, the level at which you are going to design effective communication as a training for C-suite employees or maybe a manager is not the same way you design it for a junior employee, because they are operating at different levels of proficiency. So the training delivery will be different. Do you understand? So that is why it is important for you to have target audience profiles. If it's going to be mixed, no problem, but you need to know. So you can have a mix of probably supervisors and managers and probably a few high potentials within the junior category as well. But it's always important that you understand the audience that you are creating a training for. Then the fourth output is the recommended learning intervention, which is what we've identified earlier, that okay, what best method of delivery are we going to choose for this particular training? Are we doing virtual training? Are we doing instructor-led training? Are we doing hybrid training, so to say? So that is where you are recommending learning interventions. Like I said, training does not solve all performance problems. Are you also recommending that, okay, a coaching program or a coaching and mentoring program be created whereby people are paired with senior employees within the organization that have proficiency in those areas to mentor and coach junior employees? That's also an intervention as well. Then the final output of an effective TNA is a prioritized training plan. So the prioritized training plan basically talks about, oh, okay, these are the trainings that we are going to be doing in this quarter. These are the people that we are targeting. These are the learning objectives. This is the vendor or the training provider that is going to be handling the training. This is the cost. So your training plan must be robust and it must have all the elements that I've basically outlined. So it just shows how you have prioritized the training, what time the training is happening, who is delivering the training, and how much the training is basically going to cost the organization. And even if it's not going to cost the organization anything, you still need to put it in your training plan. So these are the 5 outputs of an effective TNA, right? Cool. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is designing with learning objectives. So when you are designing with learning objectives, it is very important to define clear, measurable learning objectives. And sometimes when I see some brochures from organizations that are looking to advertise their services in organizations that I've worked, sometimes I see very poorly crafted learning objectives. And for you to be able to craft compelling learning objectives, you need to have a knowledge of using the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, the Bloom's taxonomy basically is a psychological tool that is used to look at how people learn, especially when it comes to cognitive learning, right? And it is in 6 levels. And at the basic level, we have the remember, which basically means recognizing and recalling facts. Remember level is basically used for children. Do you understand? Because as children, they only need them to be able to recall what has been taught in class. But in the workplace, this level is not needed because anybody can remember anything. In fact, you can even cram it in your head, and when you are asked, you can regurgitate it again. But do you understand it? Which then leads me to the second level. So understanding something basically talks about understanding what the facts mean. Then understanding alone is not even enough. Do you not even know how to apply the facts, the rules, the concepts, and the ideas that you've understood? And that's at the 3rd level. Then at the 4th level is analysis or analyze. Are you then able to now break down the information into its component parts, right? Then the 5th level is evaluate, judging the value of information or ideas. That means at evaluate stage, you should be able to say, okay, if we follow this course of action, this is where it will lead us. If we follow this course of action, this is where it will lead us. So you are able to judge and make judgment calls, right? Then at the 6th level, create. That person, that the objective there at create level is to be able to combine parts to make a new whole. That means the person can now create their own framework, or they can create their own guide, right? So when you are designing training programs and learning objectives, it is very important to know the measurable level of which you want to design those objectives to. And like I said earlier on, that at design, at the basic level is remember, right? So for remember, your learning objectives can say, oh, at the end of this training, participants will be able to remember the components of IFRS. They should be able to define what IFRS is. That is basic. So when you see stuff like remember, define, list, highlight, they are basically at the fundamental level, which is remember. At understanding level, you are using verb action words such as understand, appreciate, apply, or even analyze. Because before you can apply, you need to be able to understand. Do you understand? So what will determine the level at which you want to use to design your learning objective is going to be determined by the output or the expectation of that training. If you are sending people, or if you are creating a training for data analytics, and your behavioral, your end goal of that training is that people can make data-driven decisions, means that they can look at data, analyze it, and make inferences from it. They can spot patterns, they can spot trends. At that level, you want to be operating at analyze and evaluate. If that is the end goal of the data analytics training. Because remember, the strategy is that you want to create a workforce that is data-driven for your middle management, right? So for that middle management, you are looking to train them on data analytics, how to analyze data. So at analysis level, they can break down reports, they can look at historical data, and spot trends. Okay, in the past 5 years, we've been producing this product and we've been increasing by 10% or 12%. So it means that next year we can forecast our production level to increase by another 12%. So what are the resources we need now to be able to meet that expected forecast? That person is already operating at analyzed level because they're able to break down information into component parts and spot trends with respect to data analytics. So it is very important to use Bloom's taxonomy, and I will implore us to research further about how to use Bloom's taxonomy to craft efficient and effective and compelling learning objectives in our training delivery process. Good. So let's move on from there and let's quickly talk about something that I know will be a little bit strange to some of us, although not everybody, because for somebody who is already in learning and development, you should already be aware or knowledgeable about two words, basically andragogy and pedagogy. So what is andragogy? I know some people that have studied probably psychology or behavioral science would have come across andragogy and pedagogy. So basically, andragogy is the study of how adults learn, while pedagogy is the study of how children learn. But for the purpose of this webinar, I'm only going to be focusing on andragogy. And like I said, andragogy basically is the study of how adults learn. So according to research and according to experience, there are 5 adult learning principles. The list is not exhaustive, it's actually more than 5, but I've adopted 5 for this particular session, and I feel they are the most important when it comes to training, design, and delivery, right? And I'm going to be looking at each and every one of them, and also going to be going deeper into why those 5 principles are important when you're designing training programs for adults within the workplace. So the first adult learning principle we're going to be looking at is that adults are self-directed and they need to see relevance. The reason this is important is because you need to involve employees, adults basically, in goal setting. Because if people do not see that there is a need for them to learn, they are just going to be wasting money and sending people for training. They will just go, sit there, eat the good food, take the drinks, play the few games, get themselves excited, and they come back without getting any key takeaways. So the first adult principle here is that adults are self-directed, meaning that you don't need to push them. For children, when we were younger, they used to force us to school. And some of us that are married on the call that have kids, you have to actually force your children to school. But in the case of adults, you don't need to force them. But however, how do you get their buy-in? You need to get their buy-in by involving them in goal setting. And that is why it is important that when you are designing a training, it is good to ask participants or learners that, what do you intend to take out of this training? But of course, we understand that in dynamics of some organization, you may not be able to do that by going to meet each learner to tell her, okay, what do you want to learn? But one beautiful thing you can do is send the learning objectives to them ahead of time. So in training administration, I usually advise that you send learning objectives at least 1 week to the training so that they understand, oh, okay, if I go for this training, these are the things I'm going to learn. And also, you need to keep it abreast, make it top of mind for them. So as they are opening their training invite, dear XYZ, please be informed that I have been scheduled for a particular training on this. Please see below the learning objectives. At the end of the training, you'll be able to do this. You'll be able to action words. An effective learning objective needs to be an action word. Apply, you'll be able to apply, you'll be able to evaluate, you'll be able to design, you'll be able to configure, you'll be able to create. And the only way you are doing that is that you are trying to ensure that they themselves appreciate that training and they are even looking forward to it. In fact, in my experience, one of the things I do is before a training starts, I will even ask the audience, what do you aim to take out of this training? Because it's going to even help the facilitator to tailor the training to meet the expectations that the employees or the adults in the class have listed out. So the first adult learning principle we're looking at here is that adults are self-directed and they need to see relevance. What's in it for me? Why do I need to even go for this training? Is it Excel? Because sometimes the employee may not even see the need themselves until you make them see it. So you need to make them see the relevance that, okay, this is why you need to go for this training. And oftentimes the duty of making employees see the need, it usually falls or rests on the line manager. But in some cases, if the line manager has not done a thorough job, the HR manager can also step in and say, okay, this is why we are sending you for this training. This is what we hope for you to get out of the training. So that's the first learning principle. The second learning principle is that adults bring experience. So adults are different from children. In L&D, we refer to the minds of children as tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is a Latin phrase which means flat table or a flat surface. So for children, they don't know anything. They don't have any experience. They've never come to this world before. So their mind is basically blank. So you can feel it as much as possible. However, for an adult, the reverse is the case. This person has years of experience, has been exposed to different experiences, cultures, and norms. So their mind is already filled up. Right? So they bring their own wealth of experience along with them. So the best thing you can do is to incorporate their knowledge, their experience into your training. And that is why training or facilitation is different from teaching. Because in teaching, you are just pouring into the children's minds. You are just pouring into the children's minds. But when it comes to facilitation or training, you are actually helping people to leverage on their knowledge to learn. And that's why there's something in learning we call discovery learning, where you are helping people learn on their own. You are not necessarily telling them anything new. You are not telling them anything they've not heard before, but you are helping them to facilitate other ways of learning something or other things to learn. So that's the second principle. Adults bring experience. So it's always good to incorporate their existing knowledge into the training itself. Okay. So the third principle again that we're going to be looking at is adults are goal-oriented. So connect learning to real work goals. And how do you do this? And that's why I said earlier that what's in it for me? Most employees ask this question: why do I need to go for this training? It's a waste of my time. I have pressing goals. I have pressing deliverables I don't think I have any 2 days or 3 days to go for this training. However, if you are able to connect learning to their real work goals, you are able to break down that barrier. And funny enough, I was having a conversation with one of the co-founders in my organization yesterday, and he was asking me how we can break down this barrier where employees see the need to take their own learning seriously and own it themselves. And I said the best way to do it is to institutionalize learning by creating goals or KPIs that directly relates to learning. So in my previous workplaces, we've done it before whereby employees have KPIs or goals that are directly tied to the number of courses, number of trainings, number of certification, number of training hours that they are able to complete within the period of performance, within the performance period. The weightage of these goals may not be too high, because if it is too high, what people will just do is they will just ignore their main work goals and go and focus on the learning goals. So from my experience, I usually advise like 5 to 10% of employees' work goals should be training or learning related. So you can want to measure it by the number of training hours they are able to go for, number of complete courses they are able to complete, number of certifications they complete within a year. So that's the third principle, because it has to be goal-oriented. Because you need to make them see the cost of not doing it. Because if you don't make them see the cost of not doing it, they will feel like, oh, I have the opportunity to not do these things, and they just leave it there. And you have come up with your training plan, you've scheduled people for training, but they are not taking up the training because you did not connect the learning to work goals. The fourth adult learning principle we're going to be looking at is be practical and problem-centered. Now, there's always a saying that training needs to solve actual performance problems. If you're sending people on training and they are not gaining anything that they can come and translate into the work when they come from that training, then that training is not effective, or is not even needed in the first place, because training actually has to actually solve immediate performance problems. So that's why we said focus on useful job-related tasks. If somebody is in finance and they are always creating financial reports every week or thereabout, and they are having issues with these reports, and from your findings during data gathering process and during gap identification and cost analysis, you realize that the reason they are not always turning in their reports is because they have problem using VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, or they don't even know how to use pivot table to summarize complex data into something they can quickly understand and work with. Then you can then go ahead and say, okay, you know what, let us schedule this person for a training on preparing reports with Excel, with focus on pivot table, VLOOKUP, and HLOOKUP. That training is very practical to that employee, because that training is not going to only improve the employee overall, it is also going to ensure that they do their job better. So if that employee is probably using 2-3 days to create one report, that employee can use 1 day to finish a report, maybe reconciliation report, settlement report, bill payment report. Do you understand? So another learning principle that you need to be conversant with is be practical and problem-centered. Training is not just, for the fun of it. It has to actually solve a problem. So that is why it is problem-centered, and it has to be practical. In fact, in one of the evaluation questions we ask at the end of the training is that, are you able to translate what you have learned into the job? If you say no, or the majority of people say no, then that means there was a problem in the training needs analysis in the first place, because the training that they've gone for, they don't even have how to apply the training or in real life work scenarios, right? Then the fifth adult learning principle is treating learners with respect. Of course, learners are adults. They are not kids. They are not in primary 1 or primary 2 or primary 3. They need to be able to be respected. They need to be able to be valued. So you need to value their contribution, respect their contribution. And that's why, as a facilitator, as a modern day facilitator, you can't be telling people to stand up, sit down, go out of the training room. You can't do that, because if you're doing that, you're already creating learning barriers, because other people in the class will even feel bad, like, I see the way this person is treating a fellow trainer, like a fellow learner like myself. I think it's better I just keep my mouth shut and just be watching till the training ends. Do you understand? So you need to treat learners with respect. And in terms of delivery, you are also going to be looking at the type of facilitators you're also going to be using. Because I've had this issue before in the past where a particular training vendor was trying to bring somebody to come and train two senior executives. These people were head of sales for a multinational for the northern region, and the other person was head of sales in a multinational for the southern region. Combined between both of them, they have nothing less than maybe 40 to 50 years of experience. And you're bringing somebody with less than 5 years of experience to come and train these people. Even if the person is very adept, is very technical, knows the job very well, you're already constituting a learning barrier doing that, because the two executives look at that. What do you want to tell me that I've not heard before? Or what do you want to teach me that I don't know? Do you understand? So at that point, I had to request for another facilitator who is probably like their peer, because adults learn in a peer-to-peer relation. In fact, following the 70-20-10 model, adults learn 70%. 70% of adult learning is on the job, then 20% of it is through social interactions. So having that in mind, it's always very important to treat learners with respect and value their contributions when anytime training is going on. So we've talked about 5 learning adult principles under andragogy. I've said andragogy is the study of how adults learn. And that leads us to the next thing that we're going to be looking at, which is basically the ADDIE model. The ADDIE model. And almost everybody in HR has heard about ADDIE model. ADDIE. I think I learned about ADDIE model in 2016, and it was quite profound for me, because it was able to show to me how training is basically managed. Right? And basically, what is ADDIE model? ADDIE model, in its simplest form, is an instructional design framework or tool that basically outlines how to design a training program from start to finish, right? And with that in back of our minds, let us quickly now take a look at some of the components of the ADDIE model. So the first A, the A in the ADDIE stands for analysis, right? And the analysis is that identify training needs, which includes the TNA gap and define learning goals. So in the ADDIE model, the A stands for analysis, and that analysis stage basically talks about you conducting your training needs analysis, identifying your gaps, and defining the learning goals. So 3 key things are happening at the analysis stage. You are conducting your TNA, you are identifying gaps, and you are defining the learning goals. And the learning goals are also what we call the learning objectives, right? Then the next D, or the next one is D, which is design. So at the design phase of the ADDIE model, we are basically planning the learning experience, setting objectives, choosing the content scope, selecting the right method to deliver the training, and also the evaluation measures, right? So at this stage, you are planning the learning experience. Oh, which venue are we going to use? What are the objectives going to be? What is the curriculum going to be as well? So it is at the design stage, you're also outlining the curriculum for that training. right? What method are you going to be using to deliver that training, and how is the training going to even be evaluated at the end of the training, right? So that's the design, the first D, design. Then the next D is develop. And in develop, you are basically creating and assembling content and materials for the training. So you're pulling up, you're designing your slides, your videos, your activities based on what you have come up with in the design stage, right? And funny enough, even this webinar that I'm doing followed the same pattern, because I could say that it was after I found out, okay, what are what is the objectives going to be like? How should the training structure be? Should I go very much in depth, or should I stay at maybe surface level? Do you understand? So it is at the develop stage that you are creating your slides, your videos, your activities based on what you have defined in the design stage. Then at the implement stage is where you're actually rolling out your training, where you're actually delivering your training. And we said deliver or roll out the training. So remember, you've selected your method. So it's either instructor-led session, it's either an e-course, and it's at that stage you're also ensuring logistics and putting support in place for the training. So logistics in terms of, oh, okay, have we put all the food that they are going to eat? Is the facilitator available? Who is going to pick the facilitator from the gate and all what have you? Okay, so the next part is the E, which is evaluate. So at the evaluate stage or phase of the RD model, you are evaluating the effectiveness of your training. And there are two types of evaluation. There's a formative evaluation. So for formative evaluation, you are even evaluating the training process itself. So meaning that at analysis stage, you are evaluating. At design stage, you are evaluating. At develop stage, you are evaluating. That's the formative form of evaluation. Then the summative evaluation is at the end of the training, have you been able to now close out the gaps that have been identified? Have you been able to deliver on the expectations for the training? So that is what you're basically doing at the evaluate stage. And this RD model is very important in training, delivery, and design, because it is the framework that will guide the training itself from start to finish. Okay, so moving on from RD model, we will also be looking at each phase one after the other, and we're going to be looking at the activities that you need to carry out in each stage. So for the analysis and the design phase, for analysis phase, the first thing you're going to be doing is you're defining performance problems. Oh, what are actually the performance problems? What is the gap between the actual performance and the desired performance? Then you're also determining whether training will solve those performance problems. Remember, I said training does not solve all performance problems. There are some problems that are far beyond performance. That are far beyond training, rather, that training cannot solve. And you have to actually look at other non-training interventions to close those gaps, right? Then you are conducting your TNA to pinpoint learner gaps. The TNA is going to now tell you what are the root cause analysis, what is the root cause of the gaps that you have identified. And the reason you are doing that is because you want to choose the right intervention to close the gap. So all these activities happen under the analysis stage, right? Then at the design stage, you are outlining the course flow. Oh, how will the course flow be? Okay, from the title page, then we're going to look at the agenda, we're going to look at the session objectives, then we're going to look at the definition of something, the importance, advantages, disadvantages, benefits, consideration. So you are basically outlining the flow of the training or the course. Then you're also setting your learning objectives for each module. So it's as detailed as that each module in the course or the training has to have its own learning objective, meaning that once you complete that module, you should be able to do this, you should be able to do this, you should be able to do that. So it is at the design stage that you are setting specific learning objectives for each module. Then also in the design phase is when you are choosing your delivery methods. Are we going to be running it as a workshop? Are we going to be using e-learning? Is it going to be blended learning? Is it going to be classroom face-to-face instructor-led sessions? So it's at the design stage that you're outlining all of this. Then last but not the least, it is at the design stage you're also going to be looking at, how are we going to even evaluate this training after we've completed it? How are we going to assess its effectiveness? It's also at the design stage that you're going to do that. Then I have a pro tip here, which is basically that map out your session with a clear storyboard. So when I want to design slides, especially for a presentation, the first thing I need to do is I start with a storyboard or an outline. Okay, do I want to define? Do I want to explain? Do I want to go into benefits? Do I want to go into importance, advantages, common pitfalls, considerations? So I use a storyboard to outline how the flow of the training session is going to be. And that's the only way you can effectively design your materials for it. And it's also the easiest way to keep your content focused and you don't deviate. Because in the course of designing your slides, you can even deviate and start looking at things that are not even important to the particular training that you're designing, right? Then let's quickly take a look at the develop and implement stage. For develop, what you're doing there is that you're actually building your training materials, you're designing your slides, you are categorizing the activities into modules. Okay, what case studies are they going to be looking at in module 1? What activities, what energizers, what games are they going to be doing? And especially when you're looking to implement gamification, do you understand, to increase learner engagement? So it is at the develop stage that you're defining and determining all this. There's also at the develop stage that you're also going to be looking at, okay, what are the technology do I need? What multimedia am I going to be playing videos? Am I going to be playing audio files for them to listen during the training or during the session? Are they going to be taking any form of quiz? So it is at this point you're also going to be sorting out all those logistics, right? Because that is when you'll be able to know, okay, what quiz are they going to be taking? What games are they going to be doing, So basically, you're just looking to provide all the things needed for that particular training. Then at the implement stage is where you're actually delivering the training. And in this stage, you are ensuring all logistics such as scheduling of the training, technology, trainer preparations are ready. So at the implement stage is where you are sending your training invites to participants. It is when you are sending the email notifying the facilitator that, okay, you are facilitating a program on so day, on so time. You are also booking the venue, ensuring that all the necessary logistics are in place. Do you understand? Then also you want to test connectivity for virtual delivery of that program, if that's what you want to do. Then moving on from there, I also have a pro tip here, which is always test run your training with a small group first, so that they can also help you to look at the training and look at areas where you need to improve on. So it is the easiest way to spot gaps and fine tune before the big launch. So for example, if you want to know, I had sent this presentation to Mr. Oluyemi Adeosun, I think like 7 hours ago, to just go through it and probably tell me areas where I need to maybe touch on, or maybe expatiate on, or maybe tone down on. So it's always better that you have a second pair of eye, look at the training. It might be actual delivery where you actually facilitate and maybe a group of people listen to the facilitator talking. And if the facilitator is you can also even record yourself facilitating, then you play it back for yourself to pick out areas where there are gaps and you need to quickly course correct before you launch to the big stage. So that's the pro tip here. The next one is the, excuse me. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is evaluate. So at the evaluation stage of the RD model, you are evaluating the training effectiveness at multiple points. Remember, during and after, right? Select evaluation methods early. Remember, at the design stage, you have said that is where you need to select your evaluation methods. Right? How am I going to even evaluate this training once it has ended? Am I going to be using pre and post training evaluation, pre and post training assessments? Am I going to be using opinion survey or satisfaction surveys? Am I going to be looking at change in behavior depending on the expectation for that training? So it is the expectation of the training that will determine how the training is even going to be evaluated. Then, like I said earlier, formative evaluation is during the design and development stage of the training. That's where you are refining your materials. Oh, in terms of the design of the slides, oh, have you applied the right design principle to the slides? Is something showing clearly? Have you checked it from your end as a viewer on the phone? How is the slide showing when somebody using a phone is seeing it? So all those things that you're doing is basically evaluation, but formative evaluation. Summative evaluation is after the training has ended, where you are measuring the outcomes of the training. So that's basically that with respect to the evaluate stage of ADI. Now, at this stage, I'd like to ask if there anybody has a question before we move on to something else, because I think we still have, if I'm not mistaken, maybe another 45 minutes. Yeah. Okay, there are no questions. Let me move on with the session. So the next thing we are going to be looking at is choosing the right delivery method. And selecting the right delivery method is very important because the success of your training is very much as important as selecting the delivery method for that training. And we've said that selecting the right delivery method is one of the most critical decisions in the training process because it determines how effectively learners will absorb and apply the new knowledge or skills, right? And a well-chosen delivery method ensures that the training is accessible, engaging, and relevant to the audience. And I've also come up with a number of factors that you need to consider when selecting a delivery method. Because everybody just feels, oh, any training can be done virtually. All training should be in classroom, right? So we are going to be looking at the factors you need to consider before selecting a delivery method. Then we're also going to be exploring and reviewing the different delivery methods for training. So let's first of all look at the factors. So we are, in total, we have 6 factors here that you're going to be considering. The first one is learning objectives. What exactly do they need to achieve, or will the training need to achieve at the end of the training? Do you understand? So for example, now, you can't have factory operators. Let's say, okay, you have a factory and you have employees on the line that operate one machinery or the other. And maybe you have an operator at the jerry can blow molding machine. And the objective of that training is that, okay, the person needs to be able to manage a jerry can blow molding machine end to end. That kind of a training cannot be done virtually. That is an hands-on training that will most likely be done maybe in a blended approach whereby they have a day 1 in the classroom and a day 2 in the factory, where the facilitator is actually showing the participants how to actually work a jerry can blow molding machine, right? So the learning objective is one of the first factors you are going to consider in selecting the delivery method for the training. The next thing you want to look at is the audience profile. What kind of people do I have in class? Are they people that can do well at the back of a screen? Are they people that, oh, if they're in class, I can be sure that they can forget everything that they are doing and just focus on the training? And in fact, this is also important. In fact, when we are looking at generational mix, from my experience, Gen Zs and below, Gen Zs and Gen Alphas basically do well with more of self-paced trainings. They don't want to be, don't wala them. Are you telling them to come to the office to come and do a 2-hour or a 4-hour training when you can actually record it and put it on an LMS and they can watch it at their own convenience? Do you understand? But millennials and Gen X's are probably Gen Ys. They prefer interaction in the classroom. They prefer seeing people, they prefer seeing their colleagues. Oh, okay, how you doing? What's up? And that's why when you're working in organizations that have a high volume or a high number of millennials, you need to probably be sending them to trainings where you have to go and interact with other peers in other organizations. And that's why some organizations pay as high as sending their employees to Lagos Business School. It's not only for them to go and learn what the facilitator is saying on the board, but also for them to interact with their peers, which is also another form of learning through social interaction, right? So you need to consider the kind of generational mix. Are they more of young people? Are they more of people in their 40s or 50s, right? Then another thing you need to also consider is content type. Do I have more of video resources? Do I have more of audio resources or more of a presentation deck like this? You also need to consider that. You also need to consider time and logistics. So let's say you are working in a multi-sited organization and you have maybe your headquarters is at Marina Lagos, but you have employees in Aba, in Port Harcourt, in Bayelsa, in Kaduna, in Borno. Do you want to invite everybody down for a training on policy and compliance? No, you don't need to do that. If you still want an human interaction, you can organize a Zoom call like this, put everybody together on a call via a link, and deploy the training. The facilitator can even be in the head office or even in any of the other outstations. Because if you look at the cost of bringing everybody down, that cost will be humongous. Because if I'm not mistaken, the flight cost of bringing somebody from Abuja to Lagos to Fro is about 350,000 naira. And let's assume we want to train, let's just say minimally 10 people coming out from different parts of the country into Lagos for a training. That means you're going to spend nothing less than 3.5 million naira. And that is not inclusive of facilitation fees. So you are going to incur a lot of overhead for that kind of training. So it's just better to just put everybody on a Zoom call like this or a Microsoft Teams call and let the training happen. Then time again is also important, because if you're looking at doing a training whereby, let's say you're working in an organization where they run shifts, and some people work from maybe night shift starts by 8 p.m. and it ends at 6 a.m. And another group will come and start morning shift from say 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Then afternoon shift will start from 3 p.m. to like 11 p.m. Do you understand? You also want to consider that if by the constraint of time alone, face-to-face interaction cannot work. Why? Because employee A may have just finished night shift. Employee B is coming to the office for afternoon shift. So this varying time of resumption or completion of their shift will affect your training. So what you want to do is probably have an e-learning course where each person can go and take self-paced without necessarily putting everybody in the same room together at the same time, right? And another thing is organizational context. If you are working in a blue-collared environment where not everybody is tech-savvy, that they can use Microsoft Teams, some people are only even using Balasa phone or touchlight phones. You cannot afford to be saying, okay, you want to do Teams training or you want to do Zoom training, because they don't even have the necessary tools. I've worked in an organization where we have a lot of blue-collar staff, and most time when we are training them, we usually invite them to the office to come and have the training, because we know that most of them do not even have a smartphone or not even have their own laptops to work with. So organizational context is also important. So these are the few factors you need to consider. The list is not exhaustive, but these are the most important 6 that I've selected that you need to focus on when you are selecting a delivery method for your training. So now let's now look at the delivery methods look at them critically. So we have face-to-face, which is also known as instructor-led. So it's the traditional classroom style where somebody's standing in front of the classroom and people seated down, your typical classroom setting now, and people are seated either in a U shape or in a circular shape or in a standardized classroom stage where each person is in front of a desk and a chair. It's also used for workshops and on-the-job training as well. And the benefit of a face-to-face or instructor-led method of delivering a training is that it has high level of engagement and interaction. However, it has limited scalability. You remember we said that if you're in a multi-sited organization and you have employees, maybe your sales force, you have sales people in Lagos, sales people in Port Harcourt, sales people in Aba, sales people in Abuja. You can't put all of them, you can't bring all of them together, because if you do that, you are going to bloat up costs. But then again, remember, it is the learning objective that will determine. If the learning objective is looking at making them go through a sales master class, that everybody needs to be on ground so that they can learn and get equipped with the right set of skills to be able to sell well for the organization, then you might probably look at incurring that cost. But if it is just a policy-based training or a new product update has just been released and it needs to be cascaded to all the employees in the sales force, you don't need to bring all of them down. Because from the top of mind, I can even say the level of importance of that training is even medium, it's not high. So you might just put all of them on a Zoom call like this, have a facilitator sit where I'm sitting and cascade the update to them, and also put structures in place to for them to interact so that they have issues handling the product or the product update, they can reach out to the facilitator for support. So face-to-face is usually a classroom-based, is used for workshops and on-the-job training. The benefits, the number one benefit is high interaction. The limitation is limited scalability. Then we also have virtual classroom, live online sessions like this one that we are currently having. It is also interactive like face-to-face, but remote. People from different parts can join. I'm sure people in this call, there are people from Abuja, from Aba, from Onitsha, from different parts of the country, basically. Then we have e-learning, which is online. So self-paced digital courses are provided, which is accessible on any device. So basically, all those courses you see on Udemy, on LinkedIn Learning, on Coursera, on even YouTube are basically forms of e-learning courses or e-learning training. Then we have blended learning, which is a combination of in-person and online methods for flexibility. So let's quickly take a look at this delivery methods against one another, and we're going to be looking at them through the lens of the pros, their cons, and best use cases. So we are going to be taking the first pair, which is basically face-to-face and virtual. So what are the pros? Basically, pros means advantages. What are the advantages of using face-to-face learning? So it has high engagement. Feedback is real time because you can quickly, facilitator or guide trainer, please, I don't understand this. So please, can you expatiate? Can you tell me more? So feedback is real time. And it's also best for hands-on skills and small groups. So hands-on skills is that, skills that needs to be practical. For example, we are doing a training on forklift. You can't do forklift training virtually now because these guys have to actually see how you are driving a forklift, how you are reversing, how you are moving forward, how you are using sideways, how you are raising the heavy stuff or product you want to lift, how you are bringing it down from the stack. You can't have that training virtually. It has to be face to face with even practical sessions, right? Then for virtual, what are the advantages of virtual? So virtual trainings allows you to reach a wider group of people, wider audiences. And that's why we can have up to like 100, 250 people on this call, 300. without having any issues, then no travel is required. So you don't need to waste money on saying that you want to book flight tickets for people to come from different parts of the country into one location just because they want to come and have a training. So it's very ideal for large agencies. It is flexible and accessible from anywhere, right? So these are the advantages of these two separate delivery methods. Then let's look at their disadvantages basically. So the disadvantages of face-to-face, it has limited scalability, meaning that you can't have it for different people in different places, right? It can only happen at one point because the facilitator cannot duplicate himself. Limited scalability, not ideal for large audiences, because I remember back then when I was in the university, one of the problems I had with the Nigerian school system was the fact that you cramp about 2,000 students into 1,500 lecture theater, and one facilitator, one teacher will be in the front, or one lecturer will be in the front telling us that he's teaching us, whereby his voice can only be heard by the first 10 rows. So it's not ideal for large audiences, and the reach is also limited, and it's also even very expensive to organize. Why? Because for face-to-face interactions, you have to be looking at refreshment, you buy breakfast and lunch, you buy tea break items, you would pay for for travel costs of people coming down to come and attend the training, you pay for Uber fares. In fact, the cost of logistics for that training might even be higher than the cost of facilitation. So as an L&D professional, as an L&D manager, as an HR manager, you need to keep all this in mind when you are selecting the right delivery method for a particular training program. Then the disadvantages for virtual is basically around technology issues. Technology issues such as connectivity issues, internet problems. Oh, will this person have good internet where they are joining from? Will that person have? Even the facilitator to have to be considering what would happen if the internet of the facilitator suddenly goes off, right? So tech issue, low engagement. One of the problems that we are seeing now is because I like my training sessions to be very interactive. But for now, because of the fact that it's a webinar, we can't interact because so that we can stick to time. So there's low engagement. Then there's also risk of distractions. I'm not sure if all the 60 participants I'm seeing on the call are actually at the back end of their set of their devices. Somebody could have probably gone to cook dinner. Somebody may have gone to watch highlights of the international football game that is going on. So there's a risk of distraction. You can't control distractions for virtual sessions. Then there's also less personal connection. I am not seeing everybody here on the call, and I'm not even sure if people can even see me at their end. So there's less personal connection for that. There's also difficult to monitor. It's very difficult to monitor. So those are some of the challenges of virtual sessions or virtual training sessions. Then let's maybe look at the best use cases. So face-to-face trainings are good for leadership development sessions because leadership development sessions are practical, they are hands-on. Team building sessions or team bonding sessions, technical or hands-on training. Remember, all factory-related trainings have to be in person, face-to-face. In fact, it will even have practical sessions. I remember there was a training program that I did that the Industrial Training Fund Skill Center came to organize for us, and they had to bring heavy machinery. They actually bring the machinery into class and show the factory operators how to operate and manipulate these machines. Then also workshops that require workshops that require active collaboration should also be done face-to-face. Then the best use cases for virtual is basically around product knowledge training, onboarding for the dispersed teams. So for example, you are multi-sited and you have maybe 5 people resuming in Aba tomorrow, you have 3 people resuming in Abuja, you have 3 people resuming in Ilorin. You cannot bring all these people down to the head office to come and do onboarding. So the best thing you can do is to put them all on a call like this and conduct your onboarding sessions, right? Then compliance or soft skills. Compliance, like I said earlier, you don't need to bring everybody down to the head office to come and have a compliance or policy training or soft skills training. You can put them on a virtual call like this and do your session. Or when you are trying to do knowledge sharing sessions across multiple regions, virtual sessions are also very ideal for this type of trainings as well. So let's quickly take a look at e-learning versus blended, also looking at them through the lens of pros, cons, and best use cases, right? So e-learning is the basic advantages of e-learning is easily accessible. So whether during the night or during the day, during the morning, as long as you are with your gadget or your device, you are learning on the go. It is cost effective. You're not paying for transportation. You're not paying for flight tickets. You're not paying for food. Then it is easy to scale. Very, very easy to scale. Because if you have 10,000 employees, it is the same cost that you are going to deploy to those 10,000 people. And if it is just one person, it is that same cost that one person too is going to take. So scalability is not a problem when it comes to e-learning. And that is why a lot of all these massive open online course providers, such as Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, are making big time money. Why? Because the same course that they are selling to one person is the same course that they will sell to 10,000 people and get money individually on each person. Do you understand? And I think one of the things we are able to do with this webinar is recording it and placing it on an online platform where people can have access to it. So that's also how we are scaling it. So rather than me having this session multiple times, the recorded version of it is being kept somewhere so that people can have access to it. Good. Okay, somebody said we are cooking and listening. Wow, fantastic. I love that. Well, that's good. That's good. Okay, then another benefit of blended learning, a benefit of the advantages of blended learning basically is that it blends online flexibility with human interaction. And there's also higher engagement. Why? Because in blended learning, so let me also explain what blended learning is. So blended learning basically is a form of hybrid training where you actually have somebody in the class facilitating, and there's a setup, a tech setup also catering for the online guys. So I've done it in time past, I've done it severally where there's a facilitator facilitating, there is a central camera, an AI-powered camera that is following the facilitator up and down the classroom, recording every of his movements, recording the audio and visuals from that classroom, and relaying it to a group of learners in the online space. So you could have 50, 100, 1,000 people on the online space and have maybe as little as 10 or 15 people in classroom. And the facilitator is managing both groups effectively. That is the new norm of training delivery in modern day times. So as a facilitator, you need to be able to manage hybrid sessions or blended sessions whereby there are people in classroom and there are actually some other group of people online where they are learning at the same time. So it blends online flexibility with human interaction. There is high engagement, and there's also enough practice. Why? Because the people on the online can actually see what is being done in the classroom. And it also supports diverse learning styles, right? Because some people's learning style is that, I don't necessarily have to be in the classroom. And let me just be online like this and be learning and be listening. And some people are like, no, I want to be in the classroom. I actually want to see what is going on. So rather than create two separate classes for these two people, just bring everything together. When the facilitator is facilitating for the physical guys in the classroom, then there's a tech setup and is also catering for the online guys by mirroring what is going on in the classroom for the online participants as well. Blended learning also includes situations where participants need to, first of all, take an online course as a prerequisite before coming for the physical classroom. That is also another form of blended learning. whereby, okay, so I remember there was a particular program that I delivered through one of the popular training consulting firms. And by rule, any program they are delivering, you need to first of all go through an online program, which serves as a prerequisite. So if you don't complete the online program, you cannot start the physical program. So that is also a form of blended learning, which basically supports different learning styles. Because as adults and as learners that we have, we learn in diverse ways. Some people learn by just sitting at the back of a screen and concentrating and learning, while some people learn by interaction, like myself. For me, I like learning through interactions. So that is the two basic advantages. Those are the advantages of the two delivery methods. Then let's look at their drawbacks or their cons, which is basically disadvantages. So for e-learning, limited scalability, not ideal for large audience, limited reach and expensive. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, yeah, and expensive to organize, right? Then for blended, it requires careful planning, higher cost, and coordination of both tech and in-person elements. And remember what I said, you need to have a tech startup. The AI camera that I'm talking about that I was used before, I think costs nothing less than maybe 5 to 10 million naira because it is AI powered. Once it hears a voice of somebody talking, it automatically pans to where that person is, and it is capturing what the person is saying, video and audio. So it might be very expensive to deploy a blended learning. However, if you have a cheaper alternative to do it, some people just use laptops, where they just put laptop in the center of the class to capture the facilitator pacing around and talking. That is also a welcome idea. But if you want to do it well, it's better to get the right tech setup to support the blended learning. Then the best use cases are basically around, so for e-learning, your compliance and policy trainings, you can deploy that e-learning where somebody is facilitating like this and they are being recorded and it is stored in a drive for people to access product knowledge or refresher courses as well. People can be recorded. So this is a form of e-learning because I'm sure at the end of this training session, the recording from this session will be put on the web, on the YouTube platform, and people that cannot even attend this program can go there and still watch the videos and still learn from what is shared, right? Then on-demand micro-learning too as well, because there are applications now. For example, YouTube is a very good example of on-demand micro-learning. On YouTube, you can go and look for 5-minute courses or 10-minute courses that basically tells you how to do pivot table in Excel, how to format your Word document, how to set up your Microsoft Outlook. So e-learning is very good for short on-demand micro-learning courses, right? Then for blended learning, we have leadership and management programs. So let's assume that you have maybe in a bank where you want to do a management program for all the employees that are on the SBU level and above, or BU level and above, or AM level and above. And they're all in different parts of the country. Some are in Lagos. So you can say that, okay, all of them that are in the West too, you can come to Lagos for the training. But however, anybody outside the Western region or the West, they should just join remotely. So it offers you the flexibility of having the people outside the Western region to join remotely, but the people that are in the Western region should come there. So of course, you are still going to incur cost, but the cost that you're going to incur will not be as much as having everybody come down to the headquarters in Lagos to come and have that training. Then it is also good for technical hands-on skills, right? Because if some people are in the factory, but some people are in the office, then those ones in the factory can stay in the factory but join online to ensure that, okay, the factory does not totally shut down, and so that skeletal operations can still be going on whilst the people in the head office can still take part. Then onboarding programs as well is also ideal for blended learning. Good. So we've actually looked at the delivery methods. So The next thing we're going to be looking at is the Kirkpatrick's 4 level of evaluation. Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation. So who is Kirkpatrick? So Donald Kirkpatrick is a seasoned, of course, I'm not sure, is he still alive? I'm not sure if he's still alive, but his son is alive, and most of all his children are even in the L&D space. And he's responsible for creating the Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation. And according to Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation, training programs can be evaluated in 4 levels, which is basically reaction, learning, behavior, and results or impact, right? I like calling it impact. Some people call it, I like calling it results, but some people like calling it learning impact. Do you understand? So we're going to quickly look at what does it look like, or what does it mean to even evaluate training at these 4 levels. But let me just quickly touch on it one by one before we now go and look at it more in-depthly. So when you're evaluating training at the reaction level, you're only checking how people directly respond to that training. That's the only thing you're doing. Then when you're evaluating training at the learning level, you are looking at what knowledge and skills employees acquired as a result of training. Then if you're evaluating training at behavior level, you are checking how behaviors change as a result of that training. Then at impact level, or results level, you are looking at how that training training evaluation. Okay, so we were talking about the increasing level of difficulty of evaluation, right? And I said that the easiest form of evaluation for any training program is at the reaction level. And the reason why this is the easiest is because you're just looking at how people directly respond to the training. Are they happy about the training? Do they like the food that was served? Do they like the breakfast? Was the AC in the training room not too cold for them? The pace of the facilitator, is it something they could easily follow with, or was the facilitator too fast, or is even the facilitator knowledgeable enough to even handle that training? So those are the kind of things that you're looking to look out or evaluate at the reaction level. At the learning level, you're actually checking if there's an actual knowledge transfer from the facilitator to the participant, or from before the training and after the training. Then behavior, you're actually looking at if there's anything has changed in the participant's behavior after they completed that training or as a result of that training. Then at the fourth level, the result level, you are looking at how that training has impacted on the strategic goal of the organization. And when you are saying calculating ROI of a training, it is at the results level that you are calculating ROI of a training. So evaluating training according to Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation has an increasing level of difficulty from level 1 up to level 4. So let's quickly take a look at each one in a deeper version. So training evaluation level 1, reaction. So basically it measures learners' immediate response to the training, satisfaction, engagement, and perceived relevance. Evaluating training at this level provides quick feedback on satisfaction and helps identify issues that could hinder learning transfer. Remember what I said? So we are looking at, you see that the trainer, so the participant needs to be convinced that, the person even training them is even knowledgeable enough. So if the person is not knowledgeable enough, then the participant may feel like, well, what am I even here for? They might even shut down from day 1 of the training or from the first hour. So how do you measure reaction of participants in a training if you are measuring or if you are evaluating at level 1? So you are using what we call post-training surveys, you are using feedback forms, you are using quick polls or smile sheets, right? So post-training surveys, all those post-training assessments, how relevant was the training to you? Was the trainer knowledgeable? So you have a list of questions basically curated to measure the reaction. Then you put it in your survey form or your training survey, and you put a Likert scale. How effective was the facilitator? From 1, which is highly effective, to 5, very effective. Or how satisfied are you with the overall training? 1, very unsatisfied, unsatisfied to very satisfied, right? Then for timeline, immediately after the training. So if you are looking to measure or to evaluate a training at the reaction level, you need to deploy any of these tools immediately after the training. It shouldn't exceed after the training. So in fact, by the time they are already rounding up and questions and answers are already being asked, you should quickly start deploying your feedback forms and your post-training surveys or quick polls or smile sheets, right? Okay, good. That won't take much of our time. Then if you're looking to measure or evaluate training at level 2, you are measuring training effectiveness at level 2. So basically what you are doing is you are measuring the extent to which participants acquired intended knowledge, skills, or attitudes. And evaluating training at this level ensures that the content was effectively understood, right? So what are the tools that you can use to evaluate training at this level? So you're using your pre and post test. So what does pre and post test, what does it do? So for pre and post test, you have a series of questions that you've curated focused on that training. Then you deploy it to the participants before the training starts on the day 1 of the training. It might be 10, might be 15, it might be 20. As much as you feel you can take, but do not overload the participants. So let them handle the test. Ideally, the average score of the group of participants that take that test will be generally low because, of course, they don't have too much knowledge about that particular course or training. So you can have an average score of maybe 30%, 40%, sometimes even as high as 60%. Because remember, in one of our adult learning principles in andragogy, adults have experience, they have background knowledge, right? And that's why even as a facilitator, at the beginning of your training, you should ask them, what do you know about this thing before? Leverage on that knowledge. Have you heard about this thing before? If they say they've heard about it, you can tell them to tell you what they've learned about it or what they know about it. Right? So you're using your pre and post training assessment. Then at the end of the training itself, you deploy that same set of 10, 15, or 20 questions. No change, the same set. You deploy it to them again. Of course, obviously, if you have done a good job as a facilitator or the facilitator has done a good job, the average score of the class would increase. So maybe they were at 60% before, it could increase like 85 or 95%. So the difference in the average scores is what we call in training in L&D as a training efficacy. So if I want to evaluate a training and I'm looking to know if there's actually a knowledge transfer, I could say that, oh, I have brought or upskilled this group of learners from an average class score of maybe 30% or 40% or 50% or 65% to an average score of 85%. So if they were at 30% before, that's the average score for that class, for that group size. And at the end of the training, it is now 85. That means I have bridged the gap up to 55% because from 30 to 85%. So that's what we call the training efficacy. Do you understand? You can also deploy quizzes or skill demonstrations. So for hands-on training, maybe for like factory-related training programs, maybe somebody has been sent on a training on how to drive a forklift within the factory. And the person comes back, put the person in front of a forklift. If the person can drive the forklift successfully, they can use it to lift product or goods up onto the stack. They can use it to bring down product from the stack. And it means that there's actually a learning transfer. It's as simple as sending somebody to a driving school. Oh, you've gone to driving school for 2 weeks. Now you come and drive this car, reverse it and park it there. Use it to turn in a 360 degree. If the person can able to do it, so that's what we call skill demonstrations. Do you understand? So those are some of the tools you can deploy to evaluate learning, to evaluate training at level 2, which is learning. Then the timeline is before and after the training, or within a few days. So you need to evaluate the person before. Can you drive a forklift? No, I don't know how to drive a forklift. Good. You've known your benchmark. Then after the training, you put the person near the wheel of a forklift. If the person can drive it effectively, then a training, learning has been transferred, or knowledge has been transferred from the point of no knowledge to the point of, oh, I now have the knowledge. Right? Cool. Then evaluating at level 3 is you're basically assessing whether participants have been able to apply what they've learned on the job by observing changes in performance or behavior. And at this stage, you're evaluating training at this level to indicate actual behavior change. Do you understand? And the tools that you can use to evaluate training at the behavioral level is observation checklists. For example, that person that now knows how to drive a forklift, I can have a checklist. Can the participant reverse the forklift? Can he move the forklift machine forward? Can it turn right way? Can it turn sideways? Can it bring goods from a stack up there, down? Can it take goods from down there, up there? Those are observation checklists. So as this person is doing all these things, I am checking it that, okay, truthfully, this person has been able to show that they've applied what they learned in the training and they have been able to translate it to the job. Then manager feedback as well. So oftentimes when you are also evaluating training, you can also do an assessment survey whereby you create a form, populate it with questions that test whether there's actually been change in behavior, and you deploy it to the line manager of the people that went for the training, especially if it's a group training from the same team. Like how have you been able to experience or observe practical change in behavior on the job due to the following trainings that these people have gone for? So you create your questions. It's very easy to do. All you just need to do is sit down, look at the expectations that the manager had said they wanted to see in the employees after the training, and you start creating your questions to actually see, oh, have you noticed any appreciable change in behavior since the person attended the training? Even if it is just 10% change, the training has done what it's expected to do. Because the application is incremental over time. Do you understand? Then follow-up surveys, then performance metrics. So you want to look at people's KPIs, maybe for people that are doing sales. Oh, okay, the person had low sales figures before, but after they gone for the training, after they went for the training, their sales performance improved and their KPI also improved as well. So you can also look at performance metrics, right? So the timeline for that one is 1 to 3 months after the training. So if somebody is saying that they want to evaluate training at level 3, like 2 weeks after a training, they are not doing a good job, because you can't really check if there's an actual behavioral change, because according to statistics, it takes 10,000 hours for people to form new habits or new behaviors. So if it takes 10,000 hours, 2 weeks is too short to evaluate a training at behavior level, right? Cool. We also have some, okay, I think we are going to treat the questions later on. So at level 4 is the most difficult level, and this is where a lot of L&D practitioners run away from. But well, it's something we've had to handle by the horns of the bull, and I think we say we've cracked it to a reasonable extent. So let me go straight into it. So evaluating training at result level or impact level is basically looking at the overall impact of the training on business outcomes. And when we are talking about business outcomes, we are looking at productivity, quality, sales, or retention. Evaluating training at this level is also often the most challenging level, which I've said earlier, but it demonstrates the training value to the business. It is the most challenging. Why? Because number one, it takes time. And number two, it's just difficult. That's what the truth is, difficult. And if you're not a seasoned L&D facilitator, L&D person, or HR manager, you'll not be able to do it. So what are the tools to be able to evaluate training at impact level or result level? You need KPI analysis. Okay, you want to analyze people's KPIs. You want to look at business performance data or performance metrics. ROI calculations. So basically, the formula for calculating ROI of a training is the benefits of the training minus the cost of the training divided by the cost of the training. But then again, how do you want to put the benefits of a training into empirical data? Of course, there are methods of doing this, but it is subjective. It varies for different trainings. For sales, it is pretty much easy. Somebody's maybe sales performance was maybe like person is only bringing 10 million naira a month, but after they went for the training, they now increased to like bringing 90 million naira in as a result of the sales master class that they went for. It's very easy to calculate an ROI for that training, right? Just 90 million minus 10 million divided by 10 million times 100/1, and you get your ROI for that training. Do you understand? Then you can also use balanced scorecards. But for balanced scorecards, it's also a form of KPI analysis, because we're also going to look at how the persons, because in balanced scorecard, we have 4 perspectives. We have the customer perspective, the financial perspective, the operational efficiency, then the learning growth and innovation. So you want to look at how this person's KPIs vis-a-vis these 4 perspectives I've mentioned has improved over time as a result of training that they went for. But this has to do with trainings that have to actually touch on all the 4 perspectives, basically. Then the timeline. So the timeline for this training is basically 3 to 6 months after the training. So you can see that it takes time, because oftentimes at the end of the 6 months, how many learners still actually retains the knowledge that they've actually, but then again, you're not looking at knowledge retention at this period. You're only looking at how the training has translated or impacted on business outcomes. For example, let me even use another example, time management. You have sent a group of people for a training on time management or personal effectiveness training, and you are looking to say, okay, how has this impacted on productivity? You might want to look at, okay, how many incidences of escalations as line manager have to raise for missed deadlines for reports or missed deadlines for turning in tasks? But then again, you need to also have a system in place that will help you track and give you empirical data. Do you understand? Or maybe you want to address organizational lateness. People are just always late to work. And then you send everybody, or you send the majority number of your workforce for a time management training. Then you install a biometric scanner that everybody, once they come in, they are able to sign on. Maybe before the training, the average resumption time was always 8:30 for an organization that resumes by 8. Then after the training, maybe 6 months after the training, we realized that the average resumption time has now changed to maybe 7:58. So meaning that the average group of people within that workforce resume even before 8 a.m. You can see that there's an empirical data to help you evaluate that training and in terms of how that training has impacted on the productivity of the organization. So that is that with respect to impact and results for training evaluation. Then I'm also going to be looking at something here. This is more or less like a bonus, which is like integrating evaluation with design. Although I've touched on it before, but I need to mention it again. So for you to design effective training programs, you need to link ADDIE with Kirkpatrick's level of evaluation. And basically, what this talks about is that you need to be able to evaluate at each level of the ADDIE model. Meaning that at the analysis stage, you need to evaluate because you need to ensure that what you have analyzed is what is actually needing to be analyzed. You need to analyze that your data gathering methods are effective. You need to ensure that, okay, the what do you call it? The gaps that you've identified are the actual gaps that need to be identified or the cause analysis. So you need to evaluate your analysis stage. At the design stage, you need to analyze it like, okay, have I designed the right objectives for this program? Have I designed the right expectation for this program? Then develop too. The slides and the presentation materials, are they spot on? Are there no errors? You're evaluating. Implementation stage 2, you're evaluating. Then E, at the end of the evaluation, you are evaluating your evaluation. Do you understand? So it is always good to link ADDIE with Kirkpatrick's 4 level of evaluation. And the best way to do it is by starting with defining the desired business results first. Because that's the last stage of evaluation, result and impact. So define it first that, okay, what are the desired goals or business results for this training? Then follow it up by designing the training, which is level 3, behavioral goals. Then level 2, learning goals. So behavioral goals is basically, what do I need to see as a change in the participants? Is it that they would have changed their orientation or the way they approach things, or they've imbibed an ownership mindset? Then learning goals, what do they even need to learn? Remember, they need to first of all learn before they now apply what they've learned to now change their behavior. Then level 1, what are the engagement strategies? What are the strategies that I need to put in my training to engage learners to ensure that they remain, they participate and they interact within the training? So it's always good to always link ADDIE model and Kirkpatrick's 4 level of evaluation together to have an effective training program. The last but not the least, continuous improvement. Collect feedback at all levels to refine future training. So because when you are doing a training, you need to start collecting feedback. Okay, well, what did we do well? What do we need to improve on? Do you understand? Because when you are going to be doing that training the second time again, you're not making the same mistakes that you've made in the first. So continuous improvement is very, very important. So we call it iterations. So as you're iterating, you're making adjustments, right? And that's that for that. I hope I've not exceeded my time. Okay. So summary and key takeaways basically. So we've talked about training needs analysis, and we said TNE is the essential first step in the training process, helps identify skill gaps to focus training on. Then we also have the design, set measurable objectives, apply adult learning principles, and use ADDIE structured framework. Then we have delivery, choose methods that suit content and audience, blend instructor-led training, virtual and digital training together in a blended format to give you the desired outcome. Then evaluation, measure reactions, learning, behavior, and results, Kirkpatrick, to prove value and improve programs. Finally, we've come to the end of the session. And I'm going to be handing over to the host, Mr. Aloyemi Adeosho, to take any questions, but I think I already have more than enough questions in the chat box already. So we need to start taking them one by one. So Mr. Aloyemi, over to you, sir. Mr. Aloyemi, please, can you hear me? I'm not sure. Okay, I think I'll need to start taking
Yes,
questions from
please go
the.
ahead. Go ahead and take questions from the chat box, please.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone said, okay, good evening, Adigun. Very insightful session. I have a question as to who is responsible for TNA. Is it solely HR responsibility or is it line manager in collaboration with HR? I think it's more of the latter. It is actually the line manager's prerogative in collaboration with HR. Because the line manager is the person that works and day to day with the employee. They are the ones that have spotted the gaps, right? So when you now want to now do training needs analysis in collaboration with HR, HR is saying, okay, Oga line manager, give me the areas where your team members need training. So ideally, the HR line manager should just say, okay, for employee A, the person is training on personal effectiveness, emotional intelligence, and time management. Because the line manager has been the one that has been interacting for a period of 1 year with the team members or with the employees. So they have been able to spot the gaps. So what they are collaborating with HR with is on finding out the actual gaps, the root causes, and the right intervention. Do you understand? But in the case where line manager has not done what they need to do, I don't even know what they need. I don't know what their gaps are. Then HR can now step in to now do data gathering and find out where there are lacunas, areas where there are gaps that needs to be filled. So I think it's more of the later. It is line manager in collaboration with HR, but because it is HR that will drive it. But first and foremost, line manager. Okay, so let me look for another question. Okay, people are already saying, okay, I think when I had the internet issue, one of the downsides of virtual delivery, practical disadvantage of virtual learning, which is true, because you cannot guarantee that your internet will be seamless. And that's why for every time I'm facilitating, I have two sources of internet. So if one goes down, the other one can come up. But that brief disruption, I can even see because before the internet went off, we had about 60 participants. But by the time I came back, it had reduced to 35. So meaning that I lost the engagement of about 30 people just within a 2 to 3 minutes internet disruption. And that is why virtual training can be very chaotic. It can be very disruptive too. Okay, network glitches is part of the cons for e-learning. You just experienced the practicality of it. We totally understand. Thank you, William. Thank you very much, William. Too insightful. Are all line managers meant to sculpt out KPIs as well? Yes. The first, the duty of sculpting or creating or crafting KPIs for the team member is first the line managers, and that is why as HR managers we need to leverage on line managers adequately, because oftentimes the I don't know which word to use. We like to take on a lot of things as HR professionals. Oh, let HR do it so that they can know HR is working. Whereas these things that we are doing is actually the prerogative of the line manager. So line manager is to create the KPIs, but then again, the job of the performance management manager or performance management specialist or the HR manager is to ensure that the KPIs follow the set standard, right? So that's why you have KPI review sessions. So as HR manager, you have to go and have that session with each line manager of each team. So, okay, well, yeah, let me see the KPIs of your team members. And you look at them to see that if they have actually followed the SMART goal setting, Are they specific? Are they measurable? Are they achievable or attainable? Are they relevant? Are they time-bound? Once you've been able to tick all the courses, and for areas where there are gaps, then you can now use it as even a learning point for the line manager to say that, see, this is how you sculpt effective KPIs. So this is how you need to set it. So line managers are meant to sculpt or create or craft KPIs, however, with the guidance of HR. So yeah, Eniola, you're welcome. Thank you for that question as well. So somebody also said, very insightful. Thank you, sir, for the hospitality industry, where you have grey collar, skilled and unskilled. How do you evaluate training on performance and behavioral to adapt? Fantastic. I love this. To address theft and guest relations. Trust me, when it comes to issue of theft, there's no training you want to do to address theft issues. I've had this issue before where I worked in an e-commerce retail company, and there was a particular goods delivery driver that would always sell products to customers, collect the money, but will only remit part of it and spend it. Eventually, when this person was caught, that was what then he would get to the office and lie that, oh, the person did a transfer to the company account, but it is yet to reflect. And this person did this thing and continued with it up to the point that he accrued almost $500,000 in debt against the company. So HR was the cause between two dilemmas. Should we sack him? If we sack him, who's going to bear the debt of 500,000 naira? And if we keep him on the job, he will continue doing this thing that he is doing. And they reached out to L&D that, okay, L&D should come and intervene. And what should we do? Should we train? There's no amount of training you want to give this person, because the only reason he's stealing the money is because he has survival issues. He's living well above his means. So there's no training that can solve that. So if you don't want to, so the intervention I remember that I prescribed for them is that if you don't want to sack him because you want him to keep working, then start deducting what he has owed the company so far from his salary. Take him away from a role that he needs to be interacting with money. So for the hospitality industry, let's say your front desk people, they're always stealing money. 10 people come to book a room. Then they only record it as 8 and they pocket 2. And you flag them, you've discovered that that's what they do, but you don't want to sack them. Take them away from that role. Put them in a role where they don't have to deal with money and they can pay back what they've owed. It's as simple as that. Then for guest relations, you can send them for ethical training on ethical practice within the hospitality sector, such that they understand the dangers that even arise from getting in bed with guests or even being too friendly with guests. Do you understand? So for guest relations, you can send them for training. Do you understand? On trainings that you are sure that, okay, they will be able to understand the disadvantages that comes with not being ethically sound or doing things ethically with guests. So I think I've answered that question. That's Josephine Ogbonna. Josephine, I think I've been able to answer your question. Okay, how do you evaluate training on performance and behavioral issues? That's the question, actually. So for theft, like I said, you can't even train anything that's theft related. For guest relations, if you want to evaluate trainings that has to do with guest relations, basically, how many times has this person has issues with guests since they went for the training? Do you understand? If before they used to have maybe in a month, maybe like 3 altercations with guests, and in the last 1 month, they've not even had one. You can evaluate that training. Just put empirical data to that. Okay, before you used to have issues with guests up to 3 times in a month, but now you've not even had one instance in 1 month or even in 3 months. That training is valuable because it has shown that the person has now been able to learn some skills during that training and applied it to the job such that they are no longer having issues with guests again. Okay, thank you, Friday. Though came in late, but it's been very resourceful. Kudos. Thank you very much, Friday. Thank you, Eniola. Thank you, Josephine. Okay, I think that's basically all the questions we had. I don't know if anybody would like to unmute. I don't know if Mr. Oluyemi will give anybody the opportunity to unmute and so that they can ask their questions.
Yeah, anyone with questions and still want to ask or comments or contribution, they should just raise their hands. We'll enable them to unmute. Thank you so much, Omogbolade. This has been thorough, comprehensive, detailed, enlightening, and transformational, just to say the least.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
Anyone?
giving me the platform, sir.
Okay. I don't think we have any more questions or comments, but we'll just enable people to unmute and say thank you and express their appreciation and gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen, we can unmute and thank our facilitator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Also, can we also reach out in case we have